buttons, I promise. Hi, everybody. My name is DiBona. I guess I'm starting the Trust and Safety Hour, which sounds kind of like a kindergarten-like thing. And now, kids, before you go out to the playground, it's very important. So I'm actually going to start with a trigger warning. So I'm going to be touching on some fairly awful topics, mostly about CSAM, violent imagery, what we call non-consensual intimate imagery or revenge porn. I'm not going to be showing any images of any sort, not even blurred, and I actually take this very, very seriously. But if this is not your cup of tea, know that it's totally okay to just walk away, and you can watch this on the video later, whatever it should be. It should be about 10 minutes, I guess, is how long I'm supposed to speak. Anyways, a long time ago, and they say that you should always never start your talk with an apology. So a long time ago, I was one of the people who worked at Slashdot, and I started a site called SourceForge with some friends of mine at the company I was at the time. And at Slashdot, we were one of the first sites on the web to host threaded conversations, user accounts, and a very aggressive, abusive user base. They came to find ways of using Slashdot itself to have what you would call a subreddit now, but like a sub-Slashdot, if you will. And it was dedicated to attacking Slashdot. And we were of such an idealistic posture in mind that we were never going to delete that sub-Slashdot because how could we? These are our users, right? And SourceForge being one of the first sites that allowed the bulk uploading of files for projects, and people use GitHub nowadays, but SourceForge was like a GitHub, but a long time ago, and not as cool. But whenever you give users the opportunity to upload files, you're going to get some of those users. And so we, unfortunately, were at the vanguard of dealing with these kinds of abusive users, and we would come to have a wall of mugshots from our local FBI contact who we would work with. So in the modern age, I'm mostly known from my time at Google releasing Android and Go and just a ton of projects, right? But one of the things a lot of people don't know about my time there is I stood up the first CSAM scanning algorithms and regimes around Google image search and Gmail. And this was a couple years before Microsoft would work on PhotoDNA and some of the other work that would come out. So after I exited Google, the folks who we now call Roost reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to throw in and help, which I did, and I lead the technical advisory committee there. More importantly, I get to work with Juliet Chen, who asked me to come speak in her stead. She's out of country visiting her brother, and she sends her best. So let's get started. So what happened was, at Columbia, at the SEPA IGC, which I'll get into later, they did this really impressive study of the state of trust and safety tooling and experiences across both large, going to the smallest community sites out there. And what we found is not great, I don't know if any of you work on trust and safety today at your work, but you've probably done it before. You probably feel like a sense of deja vu. You're like, hey, I'm implementing this again, that's great. And when you look at the open source offerings, they're very scant. When you look at the commercial offerings, they're very hard to judge. They're very hard to compare and see how effective they're going to be. You can't do a staging test of these things. It's very difficult to do and to know it's going to work. And it's often very expensive. So it's not within the realm to just go and pay someone until you're a large, frankly, well-moneyed concern, right? So what we found is that a lot of the smaller and even medium-sized sites, they're kind of stuck. And they're like, okay, we either constrain dramatically what every user can do on the site, or we figure out ways of monetization that will allow us to afford some of these solutions, or to build the staffs to build for ourselves what we can do. And some people even will shut down rather than be able to fight the problem as it shows up. And it stinks. And you're seeing this with IFTOS. One of the problems at IFTOS, and I hope I'm not overstepping by saying this, is part of their offering was helping people use Thorn. And Thorn's really expensive, and it's a fine tool, but it's expensive. And so they were trying to help very, very small sites with their problems here. And in the end, it was too expensive for them to continue. And universally, there's so much closed source software. So it's so hard to advance the software that is out there. And this is not to come down on PhotoDNA. I mean, there's some very good software that's closed, but it's often not accessible to small and medium sites. And this is not to say that I think that all the signatures should be distributed freely, and certainly not the imagery, right? There's very good reasons for keeping that stuff closed, but the tooling that uses them, I see it like when cryptographic tools say, no, we have to be closed, otherwise people will figure out how we do our stuff. I'm like, no. The keys should be kept secret, not the software itself. That's how you come to trust it. And you know, the open source offerings, like the Matter Actioner stuff that came out of Facebook is actually really great. And it's great to see it. There's just not a lot of it, right? And so, and there's lesser still like tools that use what open source tools there are to do what they do. And so that's kind of what Roost is about. So it started as a small group at Columbia under the Institute for Global Politics. And the goal is to basically make it possible for small and medium sites, and larger sites too if they want to use the tooling, but you know, make it so that everyone can fight this fight, right? And that you can preserve the communities you want to host on your sites. So, you know, it's a wild credit to Eli Sugarman, Camille Francois, and Juliet. They lined up all the funders, and we launched the effort to the public in February at the France AI Action Summit. And we sort of, we didn't go public like a startup, but we became public knowledge. So what are our goals? And this is a really important slide. You might notice that I'm trying not to read slides to you, because I'm assuming you can see the violently yellow text up on screen. But one of the things I really wanted to point out is what we are and what we're not, okay? We are making tools for basically enhancing child safety, fighting NCII, and violent content, right? One of our backers is the group out of Christchurch that was formed after that live shooting event. And there's a real problem when mostly medium-sized sites are used as basically propaganda organs for these horrific events and horrific people, right? And so we want to fight that kind of violent content and violent accounts. And we want to provide that core safety infrastructure so you can, from a very simple Docker command, have a mostly usable workflow and basic classification for images, video, and text classifiers that will fight this fight. And the other thing we want to do, if we're successful with these initial goals, is help the civil society orgs, the child protection orgs, the anti-extremism orgs, scale what they're doing. Because, for instance, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the United States, I think they have 2 software engineers and ops people on staff. And it's a burden on them to have to do engineering. And our goal is to be the people who help, right? We are people who ship tools. We are people who ship software. I'm not going to tell you that I'm a big, deep thinker on a lot of this stuff, but that's our goal. So what is not our goal? We are not looking to be the sex and porn police, right? That is not what we're here to do. We're not here to create content ID style systems for copyright identification, right? We are not those people. You know, I can see people wanting to use our tooling for that, but that can be something they do. It's open source software. I can't control it, right? So, and we're also not looking to be a $zillion software as a service place. We are a nonprofit, 501c3, under the Global Impact Fiscal Sponsor Organization while we're going down that path. It takes about 2 years to get your actual nonprofit status from the IRS in the United States. But it's very important to understand, and our funders believe in this. It's like they know we're not going to become a policy arm. We're not really even policy advocates. We're happy to stand next to them and say, yes, and that's the tooling we work on. But we are looking to ship software to make this problem better for small and medium sites. The other thing about me is I really hate talking in the present tense about future things. So, you know, where we are today is we're adapting a currently commercial tool in the workflow space. And we hope to have that ready for release into open source, all open source, not just like a little part of it, this part, but fully open source under a very permissive license later this year. So I don't want to say in 2 months, because there's no way we're going to make that, but later this year. So we've done some experimenting already with HMA and making that better, and we're currently running inside the group an ATPDS, and we're running a Mastodon instance, and we're seeing how we can make that sort of the default test, right, for this stuff. But I would love to have connectors into all kinds of community sites, for lack of a better word, right? So even like Facebook comments, yeah, not Facebook comments, sorry, WordPress comments and Drupal comments and that sort of thing. It's, for a long time, until about 4 years ago, actually, I think 2% of the web was running on PHPBB. So it's like, and these are all places that have this problem. And nobody wants to host this garbage, right? So we just want to be able to help everybody, right? And so, and the way you do that is not by selling a piece of software to people who can't afford it, right? You try to go through and test things out. So just a side note. So we've been testing LlamaGuard and Shield Gemma, which are two classification engines that were released by Google and Facebook respectively. Running those on a 4070 GPU, right? Just a very accessible consumer GPU. You get back a response in about 3/4 of a second, right? So I would love the message from us to be, hey, if you've got less than, say, a message a second you want to run through automatic classification, this is going to work great for you, right? And the number of sites that have more than a message or an image per second being posted, that's when they can have that great conversation. They're like, you know what? Okay, so this is, we're scaling beyond this basically free installation. Do we now start tying into CSAI, OpenAI's APIs for this sort of thing? Do we buy more GPUs, you know, or GPU capacity from one of the many, many vendors who want to sell it to you? But it's a decision you can make when you can afford to make it, you know? And good on you. And so our goal as an organization is that when you look at the different text classification whole, you know, you've got open source competing with commercial APIs. So they're always fighting to do a better job. And yeah, so that's sort of been my guidepost for my entire career. So where do we want to go? We want to basically, so I love following the fella who, the person who was right before me, because they're hosting everything on a Raspberry Pi 4B, right? And I'm like, that's amazing, because I've been saying for years, I don't believe how much infrastructure people are throwing at things nowadays, right? I mean, that's just because I'm old, right? But you know, when I think about the capacity, even like a ridiculous laptop like this has, I mean, you're looking at 100 billion cycles per second across 20 processors. I mean, it's crazy. I could do anything on this. Like, we would have dreamed to have something like this back when we were running Slashdot on a Pentium 233, right? Which we didn't get off until we hit like 1 million daily actives. So, and then we went to just MySQL on another machine. And then we went to Memcache. And that was it. And I think they're probably still running that architecture there. But again, talking about data systems that are 20 years old is probably not the best thing for me to do. But where we want to go is that you're not suddenly hit with a massive cloud bill, you know, to run fairly basic capacity, in my mind, right? And then, yeah, so that's where we're going, right? So that's where we are today. So that's present tense, not future tense bullshit. And then this is where we're trying to go. So what do we need, right? There's always the call for action, right? So we need people who are willing to deploy this into pilots. We need folks who are really good at AT-Proto, so we can make sure that our little connector isn't stupid. And you know, we're also hiring, right? For folks who are really flexible, full stack engineers. You know, sorry, I'll stop. You know, and it's funny because one of the other things that so the next slide is like our thank you, and here's our backers and funders and fellow travelers slide. But it's like when we look at things like Blue Sky's Ozone, which is open source, right? There's a lot of code in there that we're just going to take and make great, and it's already great. Don't get me wrong. I don't know if anyone here works on that, but it's like this is the great thing about open source. We can all work together, move everyone forward, and that's the kind of people we want to bring on. So there you go. I didn't hit my timer start, so I don't know if I'm going beyond my time because I talk a lot. And you don't want us to take questions, do you? Or do you want us to take questions?
No questions.
Yeah, it's a lightning talk, you know?
I padded the schedule intentionally, so
okay.
You're good.
Yeah, so here's people who have either, and this is important, by the way, for anyone trying to attract funding, right? They either give you money and advice, or money and code, or really good code. And they work with you from an engineering perspective, right? Don't just, don't devalue yourself, right? Don't spend any time with people who don't want to really work with you. So anyway, so these people are all really working with us in one way or another that matters, right? So and there's more people on our website too who are great. So I just wanted to say thank you to them and to all of you for listening to me yammer. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Okay. And up next we have Jesse.